イタリア人たちの胸中は複雑でしょうね。
彼らにとって降伏後のイタリアは敵国同然だろう。黄金をそのイタリアに返還するのは彼らの。
しかし黄金を着服して山分けすることも彼らの旅路の否定。
彼らが義理立てすべき祖国はすでに滅んだ。その時点で彼らの旅路の意味などもう気の毒な話だ。
どうせ意味のないことならインゴットの一本でもありつけた方がまだマシだと。
損得感情で言えばそうなる。そうならねえのが男ってもんだがな。
The Italians were gathered in a cramped room, arguing fiercely.
反対です。死んだ戦友たちのためにも断固軍人魂を
貫くとはどういうことか。この島に黄金を隠せということか。東洋人たちの申し出を受けるという。
東洋人たちは信用で、特にあの山本という男、断じて油断できません。
黄金を荷上げして日本人たちに見られたのはやはり艦と共に沈めるべきでした。
やがていつかは引き上げられる。隠したことにはならない。いずれにせよこの島から黄金を誰にも知られずに運び出す方法はない。
洋上で名誉ある自鎮を選んでいたらこんなことには。
艦のダメージが致命的だったことがどうしてあの時少佐は日本軍に救援要請を。日本軍にこの黄金のことを知られたら少佐はどう任務を遂行するつもりだったんだ。
少佐が救援要請を出した時点で諸君にも祖国で、そして極東の島国までよく航海に耐えた。それに対するこれは正当な報酬なのだという考え方。
死んだ戦友たちが浮かばれない。こんな目に。
少尉、日本人が友好的でない場合、我々は最終的解決手段を辞さない覚悟が必要です。
伍長、最終的解決手段とは何か。
Someone gulped. A stiff tension hung over the room.
日本人たちはたるみき実戦経験もない腰抜けばかりです。我々は精兵です。すでに基地内の間取りのほぼ全てと日本人の人数、少尉の命令があれば短時間で制圧できるでしょう。戦闘員と思わしきは山本を含めて数人程度、残りは軍属の作業員風情です。上辺の人数は日本人が上ですが実質兵力ではこちらが優位です。
日本人を殺せば迎えの船が来た時それをごまかしようがないぞ。
死体さえ見つからなければどうとでもごまかせます。少尉、この基地を制圧するのは容易です。山本以下主要な兵士数人を殺してみせればあっさりと作業員たちを降伏する。彼らに黄金を運ばせ地中に、もちろん彼らの口は永遠に塞ぎます。
日本人たちを
殺しましょう。全員殺せば黄金のことは誰にも知られずに済むのです。
Oh, they had a spy, didn't they? Well, no, if they had a spy, they're all speaking Italian, right? At that moment, the supposedly locked door opened slightly. And a metal object was thrown in.
Granada!
Ah. As the yell rang out, the table was kicked over to be used as a shield, and they all dropped to the floor. However, in this cramped room, it probably wouldn't do them any good. The Italians were all prepared for death. Fortunately, the shotty grenade was a dud. Oh, fuck. Okay. The door slammed open and 3 Japanese soldiers wielding pistols jumped in. In this small room, no matter who shot where, it was bound to hit someone. The exchange of bullets instantly caused a rain of blood with casualties on both sides. The 3 who had jumped in were covered with bullet holes and fell over moaning and thrashing. Yeah, then Kinzo and Beatrice survived this because they're out in the woods, fucking off, doing whatever.
Gino! Gino!
Not Gino! No, not Gino's lung.
こんな犠牲だ。あの手榴弾が不発でなかったら全員死んでる。
Grenade was still rolling about on the floor. It had been a surprise attack. Lieutenant Yamamoto had probably judged that the negotiations wouldn't go his way and decided to make the first move. Maybe he'd even been planning from the beginning to put them in a position where they'd be gathered in one place to discuss his offer. Wow, okay. Rokkenjima was their island. They killed all the Italians, and not half, but all the gold would go to the Japanese. There was a chance that the grenade might go off late. The Italians rushed out into the corridor. They heard gunfire from down the hallway. It was coming from the direction of the submarine dock. Clearly, the troops guarding the pile of gold were being attacked.
少尉ご命令を。日本人は殺せ。注意、あいつらできます。この連中ただの船乗りじゃね
え。なるほど。黄金の番人を任されるだけの兵士と人数はこちらが上。焦らず囲んで殺せ。イタリア人狩りだ。
Jesus. As soon as I heard the sound of repeated gunfire, I knew that something, which had been smoldering since the time the gold was unloaded, had finally burst. The eyes of our soldiers looking at that gold hadn't been normal. Yes, those eyes had been entranced by demons. The Italians had been pushed to the limits by the heavy burden they bore. We wouldn't have snapped after being trapped in a distant land where you can't understand the language or the writing. Thinking I had to do something, I ran towards the sound of gunfire. Looking back on it, that was an extremely stupid thing to do. That sound meant that there were people shooting at each other. People killing each other. And yet, unarmed as I was, I dashed toward the sound, so I was trying to mediate some schoolyard fight. Didn't take long before I learned how foolish and naive that was in the heat of battle. Warrant Officer Hiraoka was lying face down, his entire body drenched in blood. Judging by the trail of blood behind him, it was clear that he had somehow managed to crawl here from a different room before dying. No, he was still twitching. He might not be dead yet, but on this island, without a doctor. No, even if we had a doctor, who could possibly save a man who had been shot this many times in the chest? When I looked into the room he must have crawled out of, I saw two more blood-stained Japanese corpses. I fell backwards pathetically on my butt, my mouth hanging open in shock. Come to think of it, that was the first time I had ever faced death in my life. The entire world was at war. Even though millions were dying, both east and west, this was the first time I'd met with a person's death directly. Ridiculous. Didn't I join the army hoping to die? Didn't I whine about not being sent to the front lines? Yeah, so rejoice, Kinzo. Isn't this the death you were looking for? Why not spread your hands out and yell out loud? Come for me, magnificent death. Someone came running towards me. It was a colleague of mine, a Japanese man, Tajima-kun. He dashed towards me, pale-faced and out of breath. His face seemed horribly contorted with terror. Mine probably looked the same.
Tajima-kun, 何があったんだ?
Someone yelled in Italian, and at the same time, Tajima-kun let out a scream. Then he grabbed onto me as he fell to the floor. A red stain was spreading across his back before my eyes.
Tajima!
As he spat bubbles of blood, he said that one word, and died. The shock of seeing someone die right in front of me did not freeze my heart. At a fundamental level, all living things are unconcerned with the deaths of others. One thing that matters is whether they themselves die or not. It was the barrel of the gun the Italian soldier was pointing that froze my heart. Tajima-kun's back burst once more as he leaned against me. Flesh tore, blood splattered. The warm splash of it covered my face. Was the Italian still trying to finish him off, even though he had stopped moving for good? How foolish I've been. Do I still not understand the scene in front of me? Rejoice, Kinzo! Now you'll finally get what you've wanted all this time. The Italian hadn't fired to finish off Tajima-kun. He'd been aiming at the man Tajima-kun had fallen on. Me, Ushiromiya Kinzo. I pushed his corpse aside, scrabbled against the floor, and dashed away, tumbling over myself. My hands had pushed off against the floor hard enough to tear off the tear off the ring finger fingernail on my left hand. When faced with death, humans truly can resist with all they've got. I tumbled over and over as I ran, scraping up parts of my body. It was painful, hot, but that didn't matter at all. I heard the yelling in Italian coming from behind me over and over again. It felt like they were running, chasing after me. I didn't want to look back, so I kept on running and running, as though the Italians were right behind me. This is death. Didn't you want to die? No, I don't want to die. Why? Didn't I want to die so badly? But now I know. I know how wonderful it is to be alive. She taught me. Biche did. I can only be free when I talk with her. No. By talking with her, I finally came alive for the first time. I was born. I want to live. I want to live. I want to live. I want to live. I don't want to die. I want to live and see her right now. If I don't see her, I'll die. I'll be killed. Stay cool, Kinzo. She might be killed too. If you live and she dies, you might as well be dead. Before I knew it, my face was covered in tears, snot, and saliva. When I stumbled into something and fell, I was finally able to come to my senses a little. I could still hear intermittent gunfire. The gunfight was still going on, and it had spread throughout the entire base. Biche, are you okay? I'll find her and take her to a safe place. The lieutenant will probably kill all the Italians to steal the gold. Biche probably won't be an exception.
Biche.
I lived for the first time after meeting you. I was born. So if you die, I'll die again. I can feel every cell in my body being reborn. Not as Ishirome Kinzo, but as a completely different Kinzo. Of course, I was terrified that I might really be shot if I went back. But I didn't want to die anymore. To truly die. So I was able to overcome my fear.
君は知らなくていい。そこにじっと隠れていろ。イタリア人の声が聞こえた。そこにいるぞ。くそ、誰東洋人め。
Yikes. Ruben stood with Beatrice behind his back and neatly shot the two men rushing at him with two 9mm bullets from his Beretta M1934. However, one of the 8mm bullets from their Type 94 semi-auto pistols went straight into Ruben's chest. All three of the shooters were struck in the chest and fell down in a heap. Next person to appear was the commanding officer of the Japanese soldiers, Yamamoto. The blast of 3 guns had just sounded. Adding on Beatrice's screams, it was hardly surprising that he had noticed the encounter. Yamamoto spat. Beatrice used that moment to snatch up Ruben's gun. He spent this last part of the 2 dying men who lay moaning at his feet. However, what had happened to them wasn't particularly surprising. It wasn't the first time it had happened either. In this tiny, cramped tunnel, nearly everyone had met head-on. When both sides shot recklessly in such a situation, the result was 2 corpses. So whoever sensed another person and pulled the trigger quickest won. That was the only way to survive this battle without a bullet in your chest. Because of this, both Japanese and Italians had killed each other without hesitation, sometimes even pulled the trigger on oncoming allies. In the midst of all this were several Japanese men who had stumbled into the fight, wondering what was going on. It didn't matter whether the other person was holding a gun or not. Everyone had reflexively pulled the trigger at the sight of anyone other than themselves trying to stay alive. Their entire base had been wrapped up in the slaughter. There was a fierce gun battle taking place on the submarine dock. and a massacre resembling a hunt was taking place inside the base. Most of the non-combatants assigned to this base were killed before they knew what was going on. The Italians were indeed quite seasoned troops, but their numbers began to drop bit by bit. Blood-stained corpses were scattered everywhere. At first, it had probably been a proper gunfight. However, as their minds began to grow weary and numb, it devolved into that most basic cause of wars throughout humanity, the desire to kill all foreigners who don't understand. Whenever they heard words they didn't understand, they pulled the trigger. But by that point, the screams of foreigners sounded no different from those of man-shaped beasts. After all, they couldn't understand pleading in another language, so it had long ago turned into a mere massacre. As the number of dead surpassed the number of living, silence began to return to the base. This was when it felt as though everyone had died, and you could hear the desolate sound of the wind blowing through the caves. There would be a sudden scream, the crisp sound of a gun, and you'd remember the massacre wasn't over yet. This happened, over and over again. And eventually, true silence fell. It marked the pitiful end for those led astray by gold. I guess it's gonna come down to like Yamamoto is the only one alive. He has Beatrice. Oh no, okay. The leader of the Italian soldiers, Angelo, had managed to survive somehow. He encountered nothing but the corpses of friend and foe. All was quiet once more in the base. He was careless enough to call out he might be shot from the shadows somewhere. So he snuck about like a panther, breathing quietly and searching for remaining enemies. There was no sign or trace of any living person. Maybe all the people in this base had died. The Japanese struck first, but at that time we were also talking about killing them. They simply made their first move as military men. So perhaps we should be grateful for this day. Even if the boat had come to pick us up, there would have been no honor left for us. We would have been mere failures in our mission, unfit to face our dead comrades. Perhaps dying here in the Far East alongside my gun is a more fitting end for a soldier. I noticed the sound of shuffling feet coming from around the corner and strained to hear. Is someone seriously wounded and dragging their feet? Noticing them before they notice me greatly helps my chances. At this stage, there's no point in taking prisoners. We must dispose of all the Japanese. I dash around the corner, quickly check to see who they are, shoot if it's a Japanese person. Nothing more. I've been hiding my footsteps the whole time. They probably don't know I'm here. Once the shuffling footsteps had come close enough, Angelo leaned around the corner and raised his gun. The voice that reached him spoke Italian.
貴様を探していたぞ、アンジェロ少尉。
Oh,
こ
then
れ
it
で
comes to
全員だ
jam.
な。俺はしっかり貴様らの死体を数えて回ってたんだからな。
しっかりして、アンジェロ少尉。
Blood poured from Angelo's chest. His gun fell to the floor. Then his knees. Then the rest of his body crumpled and stopped moving. Yamamoto's accuracy with the gun was particularly stellar. However, Angelo had waited until they were fairly close before jumping out, so Yamamoto had made the shot. He managed to hit, even with a short-barreled handgun in one hand and a woman as a hostage in the other.
それにしても我が六軒島守備隊のなさ、まさか私以外は全員死んだのではあるまい。
Exactly what I thought it would come down to. It's just Yamamoto and Beatrice, and then Kinzo is going to take out Yamamoto in some fashion.
やれやれクズども。
女を盾に取らなきゃ戦えない。離して。
静か。イタリア女は実におとなしくしてれば命までは取らんという。
It was such an obvious lie that even he wore a bitter smile. The Italians were working for the enemy, and they all died along with the garrison in a gunfight. Since this was the story Yamamoto wanted to tell, he couldn't afford to have any Italian survivors. At this point, he wouldn't be able to keep the entire pile of gold, but he should be able to grab as many as he could carry. Even that would be worth a huge amount of money. Beatrice suddenly swung her head, smashing Yamamoto's nose hard.
クソアマ
She almost managed to escape. However, Yamamoto quickly grabbed her leg and tripped her. She fell onto her back. Yamamoto mercilessly stomped his foot down on her stomach and pointed his gun at her.
じゃじゃ馬を飼いならす趣味はないのに貴様は死ねえ。
注意、彼女は無関係だ。話してやれ。
Kinzo jumped out from the shadows. He was holding a gun he had stolen from one of the corpses.
後ろ宮か。おう、生きておったか。
彼女を離せ。
貴様であろう。イタリア人どもに攻撃がある。
何の話だ。
Yamamoto didn't know that the grenade had been a dud. He had been sure that the surprise attack would work, but it hadn't. So he'd assumed that Kinzo must have tipped them off.
貴様のせいで奇襲が失敗してこのざまだ。この裏切り者め。貴様がこのイタリア女を通じて内通。
あなたが黄金に目がくらんだから。この
逃げて金蔵。この男は命乞いしてる人も撃ったわ。あなたも撃たれる。
喋るなイタリア女。もう一度口を聞いたら容赦なく撃つぞ。
Yamamoto ground his heel into Beatrice's gut.
よせ、やめろ。彼女は何の関係もない。
銃を上官に向けるとは頭を冷やせよ愚か。私とお前で口裏を合わせる。あの黄金の山は私たち。私一人では少々をくすねるくらいしかできんが、お前と上官面をするつもり。男同士二人できっちり山分けし。
五分五分に分けようと言って、あなたは彼らの寝首をかこうとしたので。
後ろ見。どうやら貴様は黄金より鉛の方がお好みらしいな。
Without any hesitation, Yamamoto raised the barrel of his gun towards Kinzo and pulled the trigger. He could raise Kinzo's right ear. If Yamamoto's aim had been just a bit better, the bullet would have slammed into Kinzo's face.
貴様
Not letting Yamamoto's momentary distraction go to waste, Beatrice lashed out and planted her right foot in Yamamoto's crotch. Nice! After moaning in pain, a demonic expression flashed across Yamamoto's face, and he stomped on her chest. Come on, Kinzo. Beatrice shut her eyes tightly, hoping that she could withstand the coming pain. No one wants to watch the moment they get shot. Drip. Drip, drip. Blood splash poured out of Yamamoto's chest.
あんたがあんたの都合で、私も私の都合で奪う。
Could Yamamoto hear Kinzo's words until the end? In his last moments, he seemed to grin. Then slowly, he fell backwards with a spurt of blood. Mm-hmm.
金蔵、無事なの？てっきりあなたが撃たれたと。
Beatrice tried to stand up, but then doubled over and started coughing.
ビーチェ、怪我をしたのか？
あばらが痛むわ。その人でなしが激しく。
大丈夫か？折れていなければいいんだが。
これくらいで折れるほどイタリア女はやわじゃないの。でもありがとう。あなたは命の恩人だわ。あなたが来なければ私はきっとそこに転が。
Yamamoto had shown no mercy. Her ribs were probably cracked. He didn't have the option of waiting, possibly for several days, for the ship that was coming. He made the decision to carry her away from the island. The man who kept yelling about preserving the secrecy of the base is lying there dead. The next island over, Nijima, is close. A small boat should be more than enough to get us there.
君を病院へ運ばなければな。君が思っているより傷が深かったらいけない。
知らなかった。この島には病院もあるのね。
ない。隣の島へ。船。君は病院へ。私はこの島での出来事をうまく片付けないと。
頼みがあるの。私を病院へ。
どうして？
病院へ行って大使館に連絡が行けば、私はやがて本国へ送還される。そしてきっとあれこれと尋問を受けるんだわ。私はママを見殺しにしたやつらを。もう私の帰るべき祖国はないの。ここが私の終点だから。もう私は私に優しくしてくれたアンジェロ少尉もルーベンスもみんな死んでしまった。
だから君までここで死ぬと？イタリア女はヤワじゃないんだろ？生きるんだ。
ねえ金蔵、生きるってどういう意味？あなたが教えてくれたはずよ。生きるってのはただ私はイタリアへ帰りたくないの。
ビーチェ。
ビーチ。
あなたは私と出会うまで死んでいたと言ってくれたわ。
God damn. They're having this sweet moment. The fact that he's beachy. Like, come on. This woman speaks English, for Christ's sake. How do you not learn some of the insults, right? How do you not know, hey, maybe the name that my friends call me shouldn't be Biche. Maybe it sounds too much like another word, because God, I'm sitting here, yo, engrossed in this, yo, this moment, right? And then just Biche. Like, come on, man.
でもそれは私も同じなの。潜水艦の中で祖国も滅び、ママも死んだ、パパもね。私はこんな船沈んでしまえと願ったわ。だからここにたどり着いた時、その矢先よ、少尉が英語がわかる者はいるかと騒ぎ出したの。
When Kinzo met Beatrice, he finally forgot about dying. When Beatrice met Kinzo, she also forgot about dying.
私は祖国もあなたにさらってほしいと願うの。
ピーチェ。
God damn it. Can we go back to calling her Beato?
でもそれは叶えられない望みだとも分かってる。ならばせめて迎えの船が来るまでの数日間を胸の痛みなんて気にしない。だって迎えの船に連れ去られたら私はもう死んでしまうのだから。
Beatrice spoke this, smiling softly. She did her best to hide the pain in her chest.
お願い金蔵、迎えが来るまでの数日間私をさらって。
その願いは叶えられない。
Looking apologetic, Kinzo lifted Beato up and gently set her in the boat.
育児なし、やっぱり日本の男はなんじゃ。
そうだな。私はだから君の願いは片方しか叶えられない。
With a clunk, he placed it wrapped in a jacket in the boat.
片方とは？
迎えが来るまでの数日間でいいからの方は叶えられない。
You smooth motherfucker. Yeah, this man got some ingots on him.
そっちを叶えることにした。
金蔵。
I used to be a doctor on Nijima. I'm wearing a Navy uniform. I should be able to pass myself off as a survivor of a boat carrying a VIP that was sunk by enemy ships. If the doctor happens to be of the greedy sort, all the better. After all, I have right here the golden magic to make people do what I say.